Here's another brain blast, and here's something which really starts way outside of us and then ends up in the brain. And it's a really important aspect of our health and our well-being, and it's a thing called vitamin D. Now, I've mentioned this before when we talked about the 9 voices. We talked about sun and what was going on with vitamin D. And so I just want to give you a little breakdown, a little bit of technical stuff, but also a little for those who are interested in that way. But otherwise, just follow the story and just don't worry about the big long words. But the essence of it is vitamin D. In some people say it's not actually really a vitamin, it's more like a hormone, because it stimulates bodily activities. It triggers activities within the body beyond just its very simple, beyond a straightforward process. And what we've also found is that, particularly in the brain and other areas of the body, it actually becomes a component of gene expression. It becomes what's called a transcription factor, which triggers gene expression. So it's actually really important. So we start on 2 places. One is way out there up at the sun, and the other one is sort of not so way out there, out in the fields of where things are grown and where there's various foods and things coming along. So, but it starts outside of us, and we need to put it into us in order for us to get it. We don't produce it internally ourselves, and it causes all kinds of different problems. One of the things that's most common is it interferes with our calcium process, and or it assists our calcium process. So if you don't have it, it interferes with our calcium processes. And one of the negative aspects of not having vitamin D is rickets, where you have bandy legs, and so that's to do with calcium and vitamin D, which is terribly important. So saying once before that cholesterol, which is this thing that we overdo because of our rich fatty diets, but cholesterol is really healthy. It sits under the skin layer and all over our skin, and when the sun hits it, it's the ultraviolet rays and various other aspects, it hits the sun, and these translate or transform the energy from the sun and the rays into something useful, and it's vitamin D, called cholecalciferol. Or cholecalciferol, yeah, I think that's pretty much the way you pronounce it. Or vitamin D3. Now, these all go in as this cholecalciferol, and they're funneled and filtered through the liver, and the liver changes it, and it turns it into something else, and it's what's called 25-hydroxy vitamin D3. Now, this is now changing it and turning it into a chemical that is actually more usable by various elements of the body, and it becomes usable for this area in the bones, it's in the pancreas, it's very important in pregnancy, so it's very important in your immune system. It also triggers all kinds of very positive activity in all these different areas. But it hasn't stopped its journey there while it's still in the body. It then goes and it becomes 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D. So it's changed again. And this is where it's very important. This part, this 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3, is very important in that calcium balance throughout the body. But here's the thing which is terribly important about vitamin D. When it comes down, the cholecalciferol is too big to breach the blood-brain barrier, but the 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3, yes, that's able to get in through the blood barrier into the brain, and it's responsible for a whole bunch in the brain, and it becomes a part of the process that stimulates the production and the expression of that gene, what's called a transcription factor. And these factors, well, they're fundamental. Without those, the gene doesn't express itself. The gene doesn't express itself. The proteins aren't made. The proteins aren't made. The body doesn't form. That's what our body is made from. The proteins which come from our DNA being stimulated to produce and to be expressed. And that's what genes do. When they're expressed, is they produce, or the the protein coding DNA, which is only a very small percentage of our whole DNA, but that's a whole other story. I might say something about that next brain blast. So when you're thinking about the balance of your body health and your mental health and your brain health, you want to be looking at your vitamin D intake. You want to be looking at the intake through the skin, and you want to be looking at the intake through the mouth. The one through the skin is by far the most efficient and the most effective. Now we have to be kind of a bit careful because the knowledge about it's been a bit this way and that way. And they change in their process. Now, as you know, we've had the slip, slop, slap campaigns, and they're terribly important because we had terrible skin cancers. But what happened was, like happens within a lot of large population-wide ideas, we've had one idea to cover everything. So slip, slop, slap, never go out in the sun, never let sun touch your skin, or you'll get cancer and die. Well, actually, what happened was our skin cancers certainly went down, but sadly our bowel cancers went up because of the important impact and effects that vitamin D, the 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 and the 125 dihydroxy vitamin D3 have on the stimulation of the immune system. So, you know, it's sort of a bit tricky to find the balance. So what you want to do is spend a short period of time, say 10 to 15 minutes, and it depends on the time of year. So if you listen to the radio now, they have things like the UV index, they have the burn factor, and they say, you know, you'll be burning in 15 minutes. Well, if that's the case, 15 minutes, then you only want to be exposed for 10. And if they say, oh, burn factor's 20, 25 minutes, then maybe you could go as far as 15. But you want a fair percentage. You want your bare arms, you want to have your face, you want to bare legs, and possibly even, you know, bare torso. And this will enable the body to produce the sorts of vitamin D that are required. Now, it's not necessarily long enough to greatly stimulate a lot of production of the melanin, which darkens your skin, produces the tan. So there's not really often for those, excuse me, for those people who are not wanting to get darkening of their skin. Now, if you have skin issues, sure. If you have issues with sun contact on the skin, that it affects the pigments and various things, well, of course, you have to take your own personal advice on those from your various experts. But in principle, that's the way it goes. Very difficult to totally compensate for lack of sun by taking things, ingesting things, but you certainly are better off ingesting things than not having anything at all. But preferably, particularly in Australia and in open countries where there's lots of sun and lots of outside activities, maybe we should be outside anyway. If we're having vitamin D problems, and pretty much everyone in Australia has vitamin D problems to some extent, then maybe we've lost our balance of activity in the outside space, in the real world that we're supposed to live in. Not the real world that drives us crazy, but the real world that makes us healthy. So there's a little bit about vitamin D, in from the sun, down into the system, through cholesterol, through the liver, changing it into something different, down through the kidneys, changing it into something different, wandering through the body, helping us with calcium, producing that and making the bone strong, and getting in the brain and stimulating gene expression so we have a healthy brain, good memories, good capacities to function, and that is why we love vitamin D. Thanks very much. See you again. Bye for now.